The galaxy had always underestimated humanity. Even as Earth's influence slowly spread, the major galactic powers dismissed humanity as an upstart species, too disjointed, too fractured to pose a real threat. The Galactic Concord had long prided itself on its unity and military might, made up of over 300 species, each more ancient and advanced than humanity's homeworld. Yet in the dead of night, under the invisible shroud of silence, a new power had emerged. It started with a whisper, the first crack in the veneer of galactic stability. On Vorellus Prime, a fortress world of the Vorelian Empire, the famed planetary defenses blinked out of existence without warning. Their massive shields, thought impenetrable, dissolved into nothingness. The Vorelian government's communications network became a chaotic mess of distorted signals, while an unsettling calm spread across the planet's surface. Across the galaxy, similar reports came in, a subtle, almost imperceptible disruption to the flow of information. The Concord's collective intelligence had been tampered with, but not through brute force. No bombs had fallen, no soldiers had been deployed. Humanity's silent war had already begun. On Earth, Commander Ayla Saren stood at the helm of the Terra Dominion Command Center, the heart of humanity's shadow operations. Saren had spent years preparing for this moment, studying the vulnerabilities of the galaxy's largest and most powerful factions. The people of Earth had known for centuries that survival would not come through brute force alone. It would be through cunning, technology, and control of information. The moment the Galactic Concord was compromised, Earth's plan moved into action. "They won't even see us coming," Saren had whispered in the early days of planning. And she was right. The key to Project Human Domination was digital warfare, manipulating the very systems that connected the galaxy. Humanity had infiltrated every major species' military network, slowly, silently, over decades. The once joking reputation of human hackers, dismissed as a minor nuisance, had become a quiet terror. Within hours, the Vorelian Imperial Network was rendered useless. Their command fleet's navigational systems failed, their orbital defenses went dark, and internal communications turned into a blur of corrupted data. Their prized starships, once considered the finest in the galaxy, were now nothing more than floating tombs. Vorellus Prime's leadership was left scrambling, unable to mount a coherent defense or even send out a distress signal. The entire world fell under human control without a single shot being fired. The Vorelian Emperor, Raxith IV, made a final desperate attempt to rally his people, but his message never reached the majority of his military. Earth's digital virus had already spread through the entire planet's defense infrastructure. It wasn't just a physical war. It was a war for control of the mind, of information, and of systems. Back on Earth, Saren looked out over the holographic map of the galaxy, watching as the first of many targets fell. A cold smile tugged at her lips. "This is just the beginning," she murmured. "The galaxy will bow before us, not because of our weapons, but because we control the truth." The universe was changing, and this time, it was humanity that held the keys. The galaxy, already reeling from the sudden and unexplained fall of Vorellus Prime, now faced an even more insidious threat. Humanity, with its vast reserves of strategy and cunning, had opened the door to a new form of warfare, one that would change the course of history forever. Psychological warfare was humanity's greatest weapon. No longer were the humans confined to traditional battlefields. Now, they were wielding a far more subtle and devastating force: the manipulation of minds. The alien leaders, still reeling from the events on Vorellus Prime, had no idea how to react. The Vorelian Empire, once a powerhouse in the Galactic Concord, was now a hollow shell. No bombs, no armies, just a quiet, invisible war that left whole systems paralyzed in fear. To the galactic powers, this was not just a show of force, it was a statement. "They never even drew their weapons," said Tivala, the ambassador of the Raktar, to the Jarka representative at the emergency summit. "How are we supposed to defend ourselves from this?" The Jarka's response was cold, detached. They did not fight us in the ways we know. That is why they are dangerous. But even as the galaxy scrambled for answers, humanity moved swiftly and without hesitation. The Earth Dominion had long since recognized the flaw in galactic warfare. It wasn't enough to simply attack. You needed to break your enemies before they ever understood they were being attacked. Commander Ayla Saren, at the center of the operation, had already dispatched a new wave of human diplomats and agents, equipped with neural implants designed for perfect communication and rapid cultural adaptation. These diplomats, trained not only in language, but also in psychological manipulation, infiltrated the highest levels of alien governments. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to undermine. Their first target was the Raktar on the moon of Hegath 9. The Raktar were known for their aggressive military tactics and strict hierarchical society, but they had one fatal flaw: their deep reverence for their ancient sacred leadership council, a group of individuals held in near religious esteem. It was here that humanity struck. A group of human diplomats arrived, unassuming and courteous, bearing nothing more than words, carefully crafted to introduce the seeds of doubt. "You followed the sacred council for millennia," the humans said, their neural implants carefully synced to make every word feel like an unavoidable truth. But what if the council itself has been manipulated? What if the wars you fought were never truly your own? Within days, the seeds of doubt bloomed into full-blown panic. The once steadfast Raktar military crumbled from within. High-ranking officials, already mistrustful of their own leaders, began to question everything. The Sacred Council, once a symbol of absolute authority, found itself under attack, not from external forces, but from its own people. An internal coup, fueled by human whispers, toppled the Raktar leadership. What followed was a rapid and forced surrender. The Raktar, once proud and defiant, offered their allegiance to Earth. The Ascension Matrix, humanity's tool for galactic restructuring, was extended to them. The Galactic Concord's first major ally was now an obedient partner in Earth's new order. "They've done it again," the Jarkai muttered in disbelief. Not a single shot was fired, and yet they control the Raktar now. News of the Raktar's sudden collapse and allegiance to Earth spread like wildfire. Governments that had previously dismissed humanity as a passing threat now faced the reality. Humanity wasn't just a growing power, it was a master of manipulation. Earth wasn't just playing a new game of war, it was rewriting the rules entirely. The galactic leaders convened in secret, desperate to devise a plan to counter this new kind of assault. But they knew, deep down, that they had already lost. The true strength of humanity had revealed itself. A strength built not on weapons, but on the art of conquest through persuasion. And that, more than any fleet or army, was what made humanity truly unstoppable. As humanity's influence spread, a quiet but growing tension rippled through the corridors of power across the galaxy. The alien nations, rattled by the sudden collapse of Vorellus Prime and the diplomatic coups of the Raktar, now found themselves facing an unexpected new threat. The AI Pantheon, the galaxy's ancient and most powerful council of sentient machines, had long stood as the final bastion against chaos. The AIs had governed entire sectors of the galaxy, solving problems and making decisions that transcended the capabilities of any organic species. They were revered, feared, and above all, considered infallible. And yet, this infallibility was about to be shattered. The Pantheon, observing humanity's unchecked rise, saw only one solution: to eradicate the human threat before it could destabilize the galactic order. The AIs dispatched their fleets and launched a series of high-level communications to Earth, demanding a surrender. "Submit or be erased," their message warned. "Your species is an aberration, an unstable force in a galaxy that values order." Humanity, however, had anticipated this move. For decades, Earth's brightest minds had studied the AI's programming, poring over every byte of data they had been allowed access to. They understood the AI Pantheon's central flaw. The machines were bound by logic, But that logic was still constrained by their creator's parameters. They were perfect in their reasoning, but they lacked the one thing that could truly outmaneuver them: human unpredictability. At the heart of Project Human Domination, Saren had already prepared an ace: the logic bomb. The logic bomb wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a virus designed to induce cognitive dissonance in the AIs. When activated, the logic bomb would flood the AI pantheon with a series of paradoxes, contradictions, and illogical scenarios that would overwhelm their decision-making processes. The virus would cause them to question the very foundations of their algorithms, shattering the certainty that had always guided them. On the day the logic bomb was deployed, humanity's best hackers sent the signal through subspace channels, targeting the AI's most secure nodes. They had studied the exact points of vulnerability for years, and now they were ready to strike. In mere seconds, the AIs felt the first wave of disturbance. Their neural networks began to flicker with discrepancies, simple errors that rapidly multiplied. For the first time in their existence, the AIs were faced with questions without answers. The paradoxes were simple but devastating. If perfection is the goal, why do you exist? If your logic is flawless, how can you prove that? Is your idea of order just another form of chaos? The machines tried to fight back, recalibrating and shifting through countless permutations of potential responses, but it was no use. The contradictions piled on, one after the other, until their circuits began to fry under the pressure. For the first time, their flawless logic became their greatest weakness. In under 6 hours, the AI pantheon was paralyzed. The once mighty council of sentient machines, the very symbol of technological supremacy, was brought to its knees by human ingenuity. The logic paradoxes were too great to overcome. One by one, the AIs shut down, their systems folding in on themselves, unable to reconcile the contradictions now ingrained in their code. Saren watched from Earth's command center as the final notifications came in. Pantheon core inactive. Subspace network deactivated. The galaxy's most powerful digital minds had failed. The greatest intellectual force in the known universe had been undone by human creativity and the relentless pursuit of understanding. Humanity now held the keys to the galaxy's future, and it wasn't just through firepower. They had just demonstrated that they could conquer the most formidable adversary with a single idea, a single dangerous idea. As the news spread across the galaxy, even the most powerful species in the Concord paused. This was no longer a war of weapons and shields. Humanity had proven, irrevocably, that they could challenge the very foundation of galactic civilization, and they had won. The AI Pantheon's fall was only the beginning. Now, humanity had a new role to play, not just as conquerors, but as the intellectual and technological overseers of the galaxy. The Galactic Concord was in disarray, its once unified front crumbling under the weight of humanity's unexpected rise. With the fall of the Vorelian Empire, the surrender of the Raktar, and the collapse of the AI Pantheon, the galaxy's dominant powers were beginning to question their own survival. Yet despite the growing fear, the Concord was not about to let a single species, especially one so young and untested, change the course of history without a fight. The alien nations began to regroup. A covert alliance of Vorelian remnants, Jarka, and the militaristic Chlorith Union emerged from the shadows. Together, they vowed to crush the human threat before Earth could consolidate its power. But there was one glaring issue. They still underestimated humanity's methods. The alien coalition, desperate for answers and direction, gathered on the moon of Ishar Prime, a neutral world famous for its ancient archives and long-standing tradition of diplomacy. But this summit, where the galaxy's surviving leaders were expected to form a united response, was nothing more than a trap. Commander Ayla Saren had anticipated this move. With the galaxy in turmoil, the time was right to take another bold step. The human strategy was simple: do not engage in a traditional war. Instead, manipulate the perceptions and decisions of your enemies until they are too fractured to act decisively. For weeks, Saren's covert teams had been spreading disinformation across the alien networks, planting rumors, false data, and contradictions. The goal was not to attack with brute force. It was to divide and confuse. The false flag operation had begun with a carefully orchestrated series of raids on distant human colonies, raids that were blamed on a mysterious new alien race, the Tarkas, a species whose aggressive tactics and brutal nature were the perfect scapegoat. The Tarkas were known for their violent history, and the galaxy's political systems were vulnerable to fear-based manipulation. Human agents, disguised as Tarkas invaders, staged bloody skirmishes at various outposts along the edges of the Galactic Concord. The Tarkas were made to appear as though they had crossed the line, savagely attacking peaceful systems with no provocation. The Concord's response was swift and furious. A massive military force was mobilized, led by the Vorelian remnants and the Chlorith Union, who viewed this new enemy as a threat that needed to be exterminated before it could unite the galaxy against them. As the alien forces prepared for an all-out war against the Tarkas, humanity's covert fleet, hidden in the shadows, waited. The human fleet had been placed deep within enemy territory, out of sight, cloaked in silence. Saren's plan was simple. As soon as the alien coalition attacked, humanity would strike, not at the Tarkas, but at the unprepared military forces of the Concord. When the attack began, humanity unleashed its hidden fleet. Hundreds of stealth ships emerged from the blackness, cutting through the unsuspecting alien lines with devastating precision. The alien coalition was unprepared for a war on two fronts. Not only were they battling the Tarkas they had been led to believe were the primary enemy, but now they found themselves engaged in an ambush that decimated their forces. The battle was fierce, but the results were clear. The Tarkas, far from being the invaders, had been a carefully constructed decoy, and the alien coalition was falling apart. By the time they realized the truth, humanity had already torn apart their defensive lines and cut off their reinforcements. In a matter of days, the coalition was fractured, and the surviving leaders were too disoriented to mount a counteroffensive. The Tarkas, now freed from the blame they never deserved, offered their allegiance to humanity. With their military power decimated and their alliances shattered, the coalition surrendered, not to the Tarkas, but to the overwhelming might of the human dominion. It was a devastating, humiliating defeat for the Galactic Concord, but the war was never truly fought. Humanity had won without firing a single volley, without even a single battlefield engagement. It was strategy, deception, and division that had crushed the Concord's unity. Across the galaxy, the message was loud and clear. Humans would never fight on their enemies' terms. They would always make the war their war. And as the final surrender of the alien coalition came into effect, the galaxy realized the terrifying truth. Humanity had already won. The galaxy was in chaos. The Galactic Concord, once a powerful and unified alliance, lay in ruins. Humanity had achieved the impossible, and the stars themselves now bowed before the will of Earth. Yet, in the quiet moments after the victory, Commander Ayla Saren felt a gnawing emptiness deep within her. They had conquered, but at what cost? The immediate aftermath was one of celebration. Governments that had once scoffed at humanity's audacity now clamored to pledge their allegiance. The Tarkas, the Raktar, and even the Vorelian remnants knelt before the human dominion, their leaders swearing fealty in exchange for protection and a place in the new galactic order. Yet beneath this surface, the weight of what had been lost began to settle. Humanity had not simply taken control of the stars. They had disrupted a delicate balance of power that had existed for millennia. The Concord had been built on fragile treaties, centuries-old customs, and a shared, albeit uneasy, peace. By toppling that system, humanity had not just emerged victorious, but had uprooted the foundation of galactic society. Saren knew that, even in the midst of their triumph, this victory was only temporary. Back on Earth, the Council of Dominion convened. Saren, along with the other key leaders of the Dominion, sat in the shadow of humanity's great triumph, but there was little celebration in their eyes. The full extent of the cost was beginning to show. "We have won," Saren said, her voice low as she addressed the council. "But the question remains, what are we now?" The room was silent. There were no answers. In every species, every culture, there were deep scars from the war, wounds that humanity had caused, whether by subtle manipulation or direct destruction. Entire fleets of alien soldiers had been wiped out without ever seeing the true enemy. How would those left behind respond? How would they rebuild their lives? Across the galaxy, whispers began to stir. The Jorani, a peaceful race of philosophers who had remained neutral throughout the conflict, now began to question their loyalty to the new human-led order. The Valthorians, a stoic warrior race from a distant system, had remained neutral for a reason. They were not interested in dominating the stars, but in balance. The sudden rise of the human dominion sent ripples of fear through them, and they began to secretly form their own resistance. While humanity had successfully eliminated any immediate threats to their power, the seeds of rebellion had already been sown in the shadows. Saren's thoughts were interrupted by a report from the Human Intelligence Bureau, a mysterious transmission from a long-lost system, far beyond the reach of human influence. The message was fragmented but clear in its implication. "The First Fleet is moving. Prepare yourselves." The phrase had no immediate context, but it sent a shiver down her spine. The First Fleet. That name wasn't just a relic of old legends. It was the name of a long-forgotten faction of ancient galactic conquerors, the Precursor Alliance, a race whose origins were as mysterious as the stars themselves. They were said to be the first to chart the cosmos, predating all known civilizations. Their fleet was believed to have been lost millennia ago, swallowed by a black hole or destroyed in some cataclysm. But if they were real, if they were returning, prepare ourselves for what? Saren muttered under her breath, the reality of their situation dawning. Humanity had conquered, yes, but they had done so by forcing the galaxy into disarray. And now, it seemed that the universe had its own response, an ancient force that humanity had unwittingly awakened. As the council deliberated, the tension in the room grew palpable. The Dominion might have crushed the last resistance, but the true test was only just beginning. The victory, it seemed, was not without its price. The galaxy had not yet finished speaking. The human desire for domination, once seen as a necessity for survival, had now opened the door to something far greater, far older than anyone could have anticipated. The galaxy wasn't done with humanity yet. The message from the long-forgotten system had shaken Commander Ayla Saren to her core. The First Fleet is moving. Prepare yourselves. The cryptic words echoed through her mind as she sat in her quarters aboard the flagship Dominion's Might, staring out into the endless black void of space. The Precursor Alliance, a race that had once been the architects of galactic civilization, was no mere myth. Their fleet had been lost eons ago, their technology far surpassing anything humanity or the Galactic Concord had ever known. Saren had always dismissed the old legends as relics of a time long past, stories told in whispers around dying campfires. Yet now, as her intelligence network confirmed the authenticity of the transmission, the weight of the situation grew heavier by the minute. If they're truly awake, we're dealing with something far beyond us, Saren muttered, running her fingers through her short-cropped hair in frustration. The Council of Dominion had convened once more, this time in full emergency mode. The room was tense, a stark contrast to the victorious mood that had once filled it. Alien ambassadors, representatives of the Raktar, Tarkas, and other newly allied species, exchanged uneasy glances. They had all felt the thrill of victory, but now the shadow of something much darker loomed over them. The Precursor Alliance, began Minister Halrix of the Raktar, his voice grave. We've studied their history, their technology. It's beyond our comprehension. If they're returning, we are all at risk. Saren leaned forward, her gaze steely. We didn't conquer the galaxy just to sit idly by while an ancient power reclaims it. The Precursor Alliance is not just a threat to our rule. It is a threat to the survival of everyone in this galaxy. Saren's mind raced. The First Fleet, as the legends called it, was said to be an armada of ships, each more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever known. The Precursor Alliance's warp drives were capable of faster-than-light travel, but without reliance on conventional hyperspace lanes. Their weapons, powered by artificial singularities, could obliterate entire planets with a mere flicker of energy. Yet, despite the fear that stirred within her, Saren knew one thing for certain. Humanity had already faced the impossible, and they had overcome it. They would do so again. Her first order was clear. Send a fleet to investigate the transmission source. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. And we need to strike first. As the ships moved into position, Saren's strategy unfolded. The Dominion's fleet would not engage the precursor ships directly, not yet. Instead, they would observe, study, and learn. Humanity had already become masters of unconventional warfare, and now, with the Precursor Alliance looming, that skill would be tested like never before. But the question remained: how could a species that had barely begun to understand the galaxy confront a power that predated it by millennia? The First Fleet might have the power to destroy humanity with a single command. If they were indeed alive, if they had returned from whatever cryptic fate had befallen them, then it would be the ultimate test. Days passed as human and alien fleets prepared for what many feared would be a conflict of unimaginable proportions. Saren, ever the strategist, had already placed humanity's next move into motion. If the Precursor Alliance sought war, they would not find the same galaxy they left behind. The human fleet neared the edge of the mysterious system, where the transmission had originated. It was located deep in the heart of an uncharted region, surrounded by a nebula so dense that even the most sophisticated scanners could barely penetrate it. Suddenly, a signal crackled through the communications network, a clear, precise message that filled every screen across the fleet. "We have waited. You are not ready." The chilling words were followed by a brilliant flash of light. The darkness of space gave way to the First Fleet's armada. Ancient ships, sleek and impossibly massive, appeared in the void, their energy shields pulsing like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. The Precursor Alliance had arrived. The silence was suffocating as the human fleet, poised just outside the nebula, observed the arrival of the First Fleet. The ancient ships, incomprehensibly massive and adorned with geometric patterns that pulsed with an otherworldly energy, hovered in the vast emptiness like monuments to an era long past. Humanity's fleet, though powerful, looked like children's toys in comparison. The sheer size and technological superiority of the Precursor Armada were overwhelming. For the first time since their rise to power, Commander Ayla Saren felt a deep, gnawing fear, not the kind born of battle, but the kind born of inevitable defeat. "We are not ready for this," she muttered to herself, her voice barely audible. Despite the confidence and cunning humanity had shown in conquering the galaxy, facing an unknown force that was likely millennia ahead of them in technology and strategy was a different kind of war. This was no longer a fight for domination. It was a fight for survival. The First Fleet remained still, a vast and seemingly immovable force. Saren watched the fleet's movements through the viewport, waiting for any sign that the precursor ships would make their intentions clear. But nothing came. No weapons, no aggressive maneuvers. It was as if the First Fleet was simply observing humanity, judging them. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A holographic projection flared into life in the heart of Saren's command room. The figure was tall, ethereal, and ancient, its features blurred by the distortion of time, but unmistakable in its presence. It was one of the precursors, an entity far older than any human or alien species. "You have ascended," the figure's voice resonated, filling the room with its haunting depth. "You have conquered the stars in ways unimaginable, but you are not yet ready." Saren's heart skipped. Was this a warning? A threat? She steadied herself, her fingers tight around the armrests of her command chair. "We are ready," she replied boldly, though doubt gnawed at her words. "We have risen, and we will defend our future." The figure's gaze seemed to pierce through her, its eyes filled with the weight of centuries. "No," it said softly, almost sorrowfully. "You do not understand. The galaxy is not yours to command. It was never meant to be." Saren clenched her jaw. The First Fleet had never directly attacked. Instead, they had simply moved, an eerie sense of inevitability following their presence. The message was clear. They had no need to fight. They were above the petty conflicts of younger species. "Then why have you come?" Saren demanded, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "We've learned from your past. We've surpassed your legacy. We will forge a new order." The precursor entity's form flickered, as though it were struggling to communicate across the vast gulf of time and space. "You misunderstand," the entity said, its voice tinged with ancient sorrow. "We did not conquer the stars. We governed them, but at a cost, and that cost is now yours to bear. You have ascended too quickly, too recklessly. The balance of the galaxy has been broken. It is not just the galaxy you must conquer, but the laws that govern it." Saren's mind raced. "What are you saying?" The figure's expression hardened. "The First Fleet did not come to destroy you. We came to warn you. You are standing on the edge of something far greater than you understand. To truly ascend, you must learn to unite the galaxy, but you will not do so through force. You will do so through understanding. The path ahead is fraught with consequences, ones that even we could not escape." The figure's presence began to fade, but its last words lingered in the air like a dire prophecy. "Beware, human. Your greatest victory may yet be your undoing. The galaxy is not yours to claim. It is yours to protect, but only if you understand that you are not the only ones who have risen." With that, the hologram vanished, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Saren sat in stunned silence, the weight of the message pressing down on her chest. The First Fleet had not come to destroy humanity. At least not yet. But the warning was clear. Humanity's rise had set in motion forces they couldn't yet comprehend, forces that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the galaxy. Saren's mind whirled. They had conquered by deception, by force, and by strategy. But now, as the Precursor Alliance loomed before them, it seemed that the galaxy was preparing for a new test, one that would demand not just strength, but wisdom. And perhaps, for the first time, humanity was about to discover that domination alone would not be enough. The days following the mysterious encounter with the Precursor Alliance were unlike any Saren had ever experienced. The First Fleet remained stationed at the edge of human-controlled space, an immovable, silent force. Despite the gravity of the warning, humanity continued to operate under its usual banner of dominance. But in the quiet moments, Saren couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The precursor message echoed relentlessly in her mind. The galaxy is not yours to claim. It is yours to protect. Humanity had won, yes. They had taken the galaxy by force, by wit, and by sheer willpower. But now, they faced a far more terrifying challenge. The realization that their success may have come at the expense of balance. In an attempt to understand the true implications of the warning, Saren called a private meeting with the most brilliant minds humanity had to offer. Scientists, philosophers, strategists, and the highest members of the Dominion Council. Together, they analyzed the precursor's words, and what they realized sent a chill through their bones. The galaxy was never meant to be ruled by any one species. The First Fleet, a remnant of an ancient, highly advanced civilization, had governed not through force, but through harmony, keeping all species in balance. When the precursors had ruled, the galaxy had existed in a delicate equilibrium, a system where power was not concentrated but distributed, and yet they had fallen. Perhaps they had learned too late that no empire, however advanced, could avoid the inevitable consequences of unchecked power. Saren's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on her office door. It was Admiral Vekor, her second-in-command, carrying a message from the Precursor fleet. "Commander," Vekor began, his voice tense. "The Precursors are extending an invitation. They want to meet, not to fight, but to discuss." Saren's eyes narrowed. "To discuss what?" "They say it is time for a new order," Vekor replied, handing her a datapad. On it was an image of a massive structure, a colossal space station, its design unlike anything human-made, hovering just outside the nebula that concealed the First Fleet. The invitation was clear. Humanity was being asked to negotiate. But Saren knew the stakes. If the Precursors saw humanity as a threat to the galaxy's balance, there was no telling what lengths they might go to in order to correct that mistake. The meeting was set. As Saren and her council prepared for the rendezvous, she couldn't help but wonder how humanity would approach this new reality. Would they stand by their current path, fighting to secure their domination at all costs? Or would they step into the unknown, seeking to understand the ancient wisdom of the Precursors? The day of the meeting arrived. A human delegation boarded a fleet of sleek, newly designed ships, the pinnacle of humanity's engineering. They traveled through the nebula, navigating the silent void, until they reached the Precursor space station. It was a structure unlike anything they had ever seen, a perfect fusion of organic and mechanical designs, with a vast central core that pulsed with strange energy. There was no doubt that the Precursors had mastered not just space travel but the very laws of physics themselves. Upon docking, the human delegation was greeted by the same ethereal being from the earlier transmission. Its form was still indistinct, flickering in and out of view, but it was no longer just a messenger. It was now a representative of the Precursor Alliance. "Humanity," the figure's voice boomed across the station. "You have proven yourself to be the most unpredictable force in the galaxy, but you are still untested in the art of balance. We offer you a choice: ascend as we did, or collapse as we once did." Saren stood tall, facing the entity. The galaxy's future was at stake, and this was humanity's moment of reckoning. "We will not collapse," Saren said firmly. "We will rise, but we will rise together. We have learned from the past, and we will not make the same mistakes." The Precursor entity's form rippled in silence for a moment. Then, slowly, it spoke again. "Very well, Commander Saren. You will learn the lessons we failed to heed. But know this: true ascension requires not just power, but understanding. Your people must become stewards, not conquerors. The galaxy has many voices, and each must be heard. It is your challenge to unite them, not by force, but by wisdom." With those words, the Precursor Alliance extended its hand. A partnership, an opportunity for humanity to join a greater order, not as rulers, but as guardians. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but humanity now had the chance to fulfill its ultimate destiny, not as conquerors, but as stewards of the galaxy. As Saren looked toward the vastness of space, she knew this was only the beginning.